it will turn into something bigger than you can imagine right now. That's why we do things kind of in faith. We just have to do it. And even if we don't see how it's going to play out, we got to show up. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Mr. Tom Froese. I'm an illustrator and a top teacher on Skillshare, where I've helped over 106,000 students unlock the world of commercial illustration. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk about the power of focus. Now think about a magnifying glass. It can take the relatively harmless energy of the sun. You know, you can stand out in the sun. You're not going to die. You might get burned, but you're not going to die. And a magnifying glass can take some of that power and focus it into a point that can start a fire. And I've been thinking a lot about, I'm going to get into it, but how do we take our sort of ordinary abilities, these things that aren't necessarily that special about ourselves, and turn them into successful careers? How do we take the things that we're not necessarily amazing at and turn it into good work? That's the power of focus. We can take our ordinary abilities, we put them through some kind of a lens, and transform them into extraordinary work that can start a fire. And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of focus and maybe how it helped me to be successful in some way, just to be more than what seemed possible given all the inputs. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about, I guess, the way I feel about my work most of the time. As some of you may know from watching my recent few episodes, I've been really struggling to come up with a good talk to deliver at a conference. That conference actually happened on Tuesday, a couple days ago. It went down fine. I can tell you more about that some other time. In trying to come up with the talk, which was about how to make work you feel like you're confident at, how to make work you feel like is good, I looked back at a lot of my work and I didn't feel like my work is very good. Now, if you've been watching my videos, if you know me a little bit, you might know that I'm a lifelong self-doubter, and this is not a surprise. But, when you're going to stand in front of a stage or on a stage in front of a whole bunch of people, designers no less, people who are going to be scrutinizing how things look, and you're talking to them about how they can make work that they think is good, work that they're creatively confident about, speaking around this topic, when you're facing that, and then you're looking at your work and just doubting and seeing just all the flaws, all the mistakes, all the struggles that maybe today you don't feel like you struggle with anymore, something like that, you kind of feel like the way it made me feel just looking at my body of work was that, I'm actually not that good. Who am I to stand in front of all these people and talk about this subject? And, I think that as a point of honesty, and this isn't being self-doubty, this isn't being negative, just being realistic. My art skills aren't individually that significant. I'm not particularly a capable person where it comes to artistic mastery. When I look back on a lot of the work that I've done, I see a lot of flaws, even work that I made last year. And it just makes me wonder, how did I get away with it? What was it that allowed me to continue? Somehow in the past 10 years, I've never been hungry, and for about half of this time, I've earned 6 figures. And I see that not to flex or anything like that, but just as a concrete measure of the fact that I'm an illustrator, I'm a commercial artist, and I get paid to do that work. And so what is happening? How is it that someone like myself with relatively unremarkable abilities, and I'm going to qualify what I mean by that in a bit, can not only survive, but thrive as an illustrator? How is it that somebody with unremarkable abilities can not only survive, but thrive doing what they do? This is the power of focus. It's by the power of focus. I feel like I've been able to take what I've got, my love of creativity, my artistic abilities, knowing what inspires me, my curiosity, my penchant for problem solving, my analytical nature, even my skepticism and self-doubt. I've been able to channel all these into some kind of singular expression of myself as the commercial artist. It's my particular brand of using color, shape, form, the way I draw, my ideas, the way I talk about myself, the way I channel a client's brief through my unique lens into something that's both very much on point and very much my own unique creation. Somehow focus is responsible for taking all these disparate things and turning them into things that matter, things that have meaning, things that work. So the question I have this metaphor of the magnifying glass, that focuses the energy of the sun and points it at a single point that can start a fire. If that point is the effect of my work or the work itself, what's the lens? What is it that focuses everything I do into something more singular? Like, you can call it my personal brand, my style, my voice, your personal style, your style, your brand, your voice. So for me, what is that lens? Is it my work ethic? Is it that I'm capable of just showing up every day and working at something? Is it my way of thinking, or is it my ideas? Is it something kind of more abstract, like some overall sense of direction that I have? Maybe it's like knowing what I want or fixing my eyes on some desire and chasing it. Or is it being tuned into my thoughts, kind of having an inner dialogue? I'm a constant journaler. I write a lot to myself. I talk to myself a lot. Is that what the lens is? Or maybe it's my laziness. As someone who works in the creative field every day, I try to minimize the overall effort that I put into things so that I don't burn out. I have a drive to streamline everything so I don't have to struggle so much. As an example of what I'm kind of playfully calling my laziness is my style. It's really an attempt to systematize my creativity, to take things that I've already developed and to reuse those things in the future so that I have consistency between what I made in both the past and in the future. My style is basically a program that I can operate on. I get consistency, I get results, I can come up with ideas predictably. The results, what things look like, is predictable. It becomes a product that I can sell. So what is that lens? I don't know if I've quite figured it out. But what I do know is focus is sacrifice. It's commitment to one thing at the expense of everything else. Focus is decision. It's particular and it's specific. It's the constant effort to boil something down to an essence. It's the pursuit of one thing over all others. Focus is the ability to say no to the temptation of good opportunities and yes to the truth of your reality. Focus is being loyal to who you are and what you want versus who you think others want you to be or what you think you ought to want. Know what you want and go for that. That's what focus is. So I said I'd qualify what I mean by myself being unremarkable because clearly I'm successful and I have some things about my body of work that are in some way remarkable. Otherwise, I wouldn't be an illustrator for 10 years in the way that I have been, and a teacher on Skillshare, and a top teacher at that. And again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just trying to string together some ideas about what makes the difference between someone who's very talented but not successful and someone like myself who's not necessarily incredibly talented but has seen some success. Why is that the case? So what's unremarkable about me? How unremarkable are my abilities? I draw uniquely, but I don't draw very well. I'm also very distracted. Like I find it very hard to focus, ironically enough, on any single task. Once I get into a task, then I'm like deeply focused and it's hard to do anything else. But there's a lot of my work that involves me just flitting from one idea to the next, one task to the next, one email to a message to Twitter to Instagram. We all know what that's about. But, I'm not remarkably focused in that sense all the time. I wasn't a very great high school student. I almost failed. I was kind of a C and D student in my later high school years. In fact, I failed my senior high school art class. If you look at my illustrations, they're not technically amazing. My ideas aren't groundbreaking. I don't want to sell myself short, but there are many, many, many more, way more accomplished illustrators than me out there. Even such weird examples as I'm just like an average guy. I'm of average height. I have an average shoe size. So what's going on? How can someone who's kind of average with average abilities do things that are above average? How do we get a result that's greater than the sum of all the parts that go into it? Again, I think a big part of this is focus. Out of all the things that you can possibly do, you have to choose just one thing. And you need to do it enough times and for long enough for it to take shape, for you to figure out whether that's a thing you should be doing or not. So again, I think one of the answers is that it's focus. We have infinite possibilities of what we could be doing, but we just have to choose something and do it. And we need to do it long enough for it to take shape. I think in focusing, we identify something that seems to have potential and we latch onto it, at least for a while. And we notice that others identify it as well. They name it for us sometimes. They say, Tom, you're really good with letterpress printing. You should do more of that. Tom, your hand lettering reminds me a lot of Andy Warhol's lettering. I really like that. You should do more of that. You should become an illustrator. I mean, you made these illustrations. Why aren't you doing this full time? You should be doing that. These are clues from other people about what I should be focusing on. So what are some examples of what focus looks like specifically? Like, I'm trying to think of examples from my life that, prove my point here. And I think the idea of focus happens at many different levels. There's focusing on projects. There's focusing at the level of my crafts, the tools and things that I bring to projects. And then there's focus on the level of my overall career trajectory. So there's maybe these three levels. There's the like big career sort of focus. There's the what do I do focus, my craft. And then there's what am I doing with what I do, the individual specific projects. Like focus happens at all these levels. So I'm just gonna name different things that fall into some of these different categories. It's gonna be a little bit scattered and unfocused. But for instance, I fixate on things and then I use them over and over again. My original illustrating techniques, early years, they ended up being what I called inky illustrations. I used physical textures that I made with black ink. I'd scan them in, I'd bring them into Photoshop, I'd use alpha channels to isolate them, and then I'd bring color on them and I'd mask them or give them shape using the pen tool. This is a very technical description of what I used to make my illustration, but I focused on this one set of techniques and I used it over and over and over again on a whole bunch of different things, and that became a part of my voice and it became the basis for my first Skillshare class. To this day, I've let go of that specific tool or technique in how I make my work, but I'm still very fixated on the idea of printmaking inspired as the driving force of my technique and style. And I should say the whole element of my inky illustrations and the way I use color and the way I use the pen tool and stuff was also very much geared around my love of letterpress printing. So I carry a lot of that still with me. My bigger point here is that I kind of fixate on a technique and then I push it and I beat the heck out of it. I use the heck out of it. I play it out as much as I can. Because, once I find something that works, why would I want to explore anymore? Why would I want to go and try a whole bunch of other things that may not work? That's just one example of focus in my life. I'm also fixated on the idea of having a singular focused style that I can repeat. This is my craft. I'm fixated on the idea of having a reliable process that can carry me through all creative problems. This is what I was talking about before about me being lazy. I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Once I have a system, I want to be able to use it over and over again to make my life easier. Here's another example of focus. I don't have a lot of books and I don't read many books. I don't pursue a lot of new books. I don't pursue a lot of new sources of inspiration all the time. But there's a relatively small few books that I keep on hand. I keep returning to them, and these are my source of ideas and inspiration and guidance. I have, just as an example, I have one right here. This isn't a book. This is just a corny catalog from the 1970s with a bunch of stupid old cheap housewares. I mean, this was Amazon before Amazon was a thing. And I have drawn inspiration from this single magazine more than from any other resource in my entire career. My sister mailed it to me, I think, for my birthday, maybe 12 years ago. And I still have it. It's still kicking around. And to this day, I'm drawing things in my sketchbook from that. And I don't know what it is. That's maybe a different talk. But instead of thinking I need a million different ways of being inspired, I'm okay just to have this one thing and keep returning to it. And over the years, my appreciation for this one example of a source of inspiration, it changes. There's different levels and layers, and there's something true about this that's very true to me, and things that make me nostalgic. And again, that's a whole other video to make, maybe more personal and autobiographical or something. I don't need tons of things to be inspired. I can focus on just a few and just keep drawing from that same well. I don't have many specific heroes. I bet you can name my hero if you've been watching my videos, watching my classes. I bet, if I don't even say it, that you would know who my hero is. That's right, it's Paul Rand. He's my key influence, and I draw from his well more than any other. I focus on one person who's made a huge impact on me. I do have other sources of inspiration, Miroslav Sasek. I have Blex Bolex, just for instance, Olympia Zanioli. These are all huge inspirations to me. They're my heroes, but no one is a hero to me in the way that Paul Rand is. Another example of focus in my life is that, I'm a stickler about working with clients who understand what I do and want what I do specifically. And I'm okay to say no to perfectly good opportunities, perfectly good clients who don't seem to fit what seems to be my area of focus. And working within my range in this way may seem limiting, but it allows me to go deeper into whatever it is I'm doing. My work may not be technically amazing, my ideas may not be groundbreaking, but I go deep into what I'm doing. I lean in hard, and that at least helps me have a more consistent voice that gives my work a focus, and it gives me focus of what to choose to do and choose not to do. Here's another example of focus. I have this observation, I talk about this in my classes, and I probably talk about it here too sometimes. We move from general to specific at all levels of our creativity and careers. So I talk about in my style class how when we're trying to find a style, at the very beginning, we're not going to have a style that's singular. We're generalists. There's so much possibility and there's all kinds of stuff. But over time, as we work things out, things become or should become increasingly more narrow and more singular. And over time, that's how our style and our unique voice and the specifics of our unique voice become clearer and clearer. So this is just another notion of focus that's active in my thinking about creativity in general. I mentioned that there's these, 3 different levels. There's career, there's our craft, and then there's the level of the projects. In projects, we start off with almost no idea of what's going to happen. There's infinite possibility. There's no one solution that we can imagine. And then we go through a process of steps that filter out all these possibilities. And as we focus in on key problems, then key specific solutions arise out of that in response. We find specific answers by identifying specific problems and pairing them up with specific ways that we think, specific lenses we see through, specific tools and techniques that we use, our specific way of handling visual problems. Another thing that I do, just in terms of focus over my career, is I'm continually trying to prune my voice. I'm trying to prune out the things that I show on my portfolio, for instance. And even if I have a really great, impressive client, if I don't want to do that work anymore, if it's not representative of the kind of work I want to be doing anymore, then I'm okay to pull that out. So I know that I'm kind of meandering. There's lots of ideas that I'm floating around here. I want to give you some practical ways of applying this principle of focus in your own life. So how can you harness the power of focus? The first way is, of course, identifying what you're good at. What do you think you're good at? What do you think others say you're good at? Or what are others saying you're good at? What are you confident doing? That's a huge clue to what you can be focusing on. You should always look for the specific ways in which what you're doing, the work you're making, is truly working. And you can know if it's working often by how you feel about it and about how others say they feel about it. And of course, you can ask, what are others coming to you for? What are you being known for? How you feel about that may be one of two things. Maybe people are coming to you for something you don't want to do anymore, in which case you can focus by saying, yes, people are coming to me for this, but no, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm going to decide not to do that because I want to do this other thing. On the other hand, you may, after some thought, realize people are coming to me for this. I'm good at it. I feel confident about it. I'm going to focus more on this and not on other things. So you can look for clues on what to focus on just based on what you think you're good at and what others are coming to you for and basically feeling you're good at as well. Another hugely important thing, and maybe this is the most important thing, is you need to identify what you want to do. And this really dovetails into what I just said. What do you want to be doing with your creativity? As an illustrator, if that's what you want to be, what kind of illustration do you want to be making? Imagine, what's your dream project? Who are your dream clients? When you think about making it or being successful, what does that look like specifically? Where are you going to live? What city will you be creating in? What kind of things are you actually making? Who's your audience? Who's paying attention to you? How do you feel when you're making the work? What does a day in the life look like for you? What's your measure of success? And also you should be asking yourself, what's your measure of success? Like, is it money, awards, publication, like being published somewhere? All these things are about knowing what you want. I know these are very specific questions, like where do you want to live? Maybe you don't know, but maybe you should know. My challenge to you is to think of questions like, what kind of work do you want to be making? What is your dream project? Who are your dream clients? If you don't know the answer to those, maybe you need to think more specifically about those things. Because when we get more specific, when we get more focused on what we want, we suddenly start seeing them materialize. I think that's just the nature of naming things. When you name things specifically, you're able to actually see them if they're there or pursue them if they're not. So another way of applying focus in your life is to take stock of where you are right now. What clues or inklings do you have about your potential of all of the above, whatever it is that you want or whatever your dream project is? Do you have any clues that you might be actually able to do that those things are possible? What are the current opportunities right now, and how are you making the most of them? What are you doing that you believe will feed into your future success? I think we often think about, when things align properly in this exact way, then I'll be living the dream. I've got kind of good/bad news, which is there is no arrival. Like you're never going to feel like you're truly making it. You're never going to feel satisfied that like you've landed, you're doing it. And if you do, it's going to be very short-lived, and you're going to later see that as just a step along to something else. So the important thing is to look right now and see something, some value in what you're working on right now, some opportunity, some client that maybe isn't your favorite. They're not at the level that you wish you were working at. Maybe it's just like a local client that nobody's heard of, but you really want to work for a multinational corporation. I don't know, whatever your dreams are, that's up to you. But you have to see the value in what you're doing now and see how it builds up to that thing that you want. How does it play into your story of focus? Now, this next tip in how to apply focus in your life is pretty big. And I also talk about this in my style class. I talk about this in some of my videos, is you want to create a practice or a habit, some kind of thing that you do every day that's sort of like an investment in your future. Specifically, I'm talking about daily projects. It's something that you show up every day and do because it's the thing you do. You don't know if it's going to turn out exactly like one thing or another, but it's pointed in the right direction. Maybe it's drawing something every day and sharing it on Instagram. It's doing something that looks like or is what you want to be doing, and you're doing it before anyone is hiring you to do it or giving you permission to do it. You're doing what you want to be. And I think Austin Kleon talks about this in one of his books. He talks about the verb versus the noun. Like, drop the idea of you being an artist, or maybe more specifically, drop the idea of you being an illustrator. Start illustrating. When you do this daily practice or project, this thing that you work at every day, you do it because you're compelled to. You have to do it. There's no choice. You do it because if you don't, nothing will change. You do it even if you think it's going to suck or fail. And what is an example of a daily project? I talked about drawing something every day and posting on Instagram. That's something that I do even to this day. Maybe it's as simple as filling one page of your sketchbook and drawing every day. Similarly, another Daily practice could just be filling one page of your journal, writing every day. Maybe drawing feels like too big of a step, but writing, I mean, if you can talk, if you can express a thought, you can fill a page of thoughts once a day, every day. Another thing that you can do, and I've already talked about how I do this, make something that you share on social media every day. Right now, the thing that I'm doing every day is just drawing in this funny little sketchbook. These are ugly books, and I just draw with these colored markers. But it didn't start like this. I started just drawing with my pencil and my Moleskine, and even with my ugly books that I'm doing, they've taken on many different iterations over the past few months. Like they haven't all looked like this. Some of them have been a lot more esoteric and weird, but I'm just on a mission to just keep showing up every day and doing a thing as a practice, because in there I can find clues to the next thing that builds into my focus. My sketchbook, by the way, is very unfocused. I go through phases and it's very varied, but it's by you need to have somewhere where you do a lot of things so that you can at least know what you're choosing not to do and choosing what to do. But that's an aside. So here's another practical way you can have a practice. Each day, find one thing that inspires you and share that on your stories on Instagram. It could be that simple. So whatever it is that you want to do every day, if you do that, it does materialize into something. You just don't know what it is now. I guarantee it. You come and do something creative consistently in a consistent way, it will turn into something bigger than you can imagine right now. That's why we do things kind of in faith. We just have to do it. And even if we don't see how it's going to play out, we got to show up. So another practical tip of applying focus in your life is pursuing the thing you want. So of course, as we're talking about ways of practically applying this idea of focus in your life and knowing what you want being one of the most important things, there does come a time where you just need to pursue the thing you want. You need to actually go for it. There comes a time when you have to put your money where your mouth is and you do the thing you say you want to do. So I challenge you to ask yourself, what are the things you can and need to do that? What are the things you can and need to do to make your dreams a reality, to go out and pursue what you really want? Is it making a portfolio website? Is it focusing your website, like taking off projects that you're kind of attached to, but don't really tell the story that you want to be saying? It doesn't give the focus to your work that you wish you had. Well, give that focus to your work by focusing it. And that means sacrificing other things that aren't telling that story. As you're trying to find your focus, as you're pursuing what you want, as you're doing all these things that I'm talking about, a lot of it comes down to self-awareness. You need to be cognizant of what you're doing and what's working and what's not. So talking about your portfolio, you want to show the work you want to do more of. This is what I keep saying. Like, don't show work you don't want to do more of, even if it seems like it was an impressive client or something like that. Even if the work you want to be doing isn't as impressive, show that, because that's what you want to do more of. It does risk that you're not going to get as big of clients, but it also is a risk that if you keep showing work that you don't want to do, you're going to keep doing or being asked to do more of that. And if you say yes to those kinds of jobs, it's going to steal time away from you pursuing what you really want. Resist temptation to share work that impresses on one level, but will only get you more work that distracts you from what you really want. Anyway, so wrapping things up here, focus is essential for bringing together our many various abilities and proclivities, the things we can do and want to be doing, into something more powerful. Focus is doing one thing at the expense of all others. Focus is a choice. It's the thing we've decided to do out of all other things. And when you're doing that thing, you're not doing all the other things, whatever they might have been. Focus is a sacrifice. This is something that I found out recently and I'm obsessed with it. The word focus comes from the Latin word hearth, or fireplace, which in ancient cultures is a place of offering sacrifices in the home. Focus is literally or metaphorically an altar. Focus is where you give up what might be for what will be. You choose one thing and then you move forward with that one thing. And by the way, focus doesn't mean you never get to do other things. It doesn't mean you don't get to change your mind. It means that you just give things that have potential the chance they need. And if things don't work out, it gives you something to change your mind about. And if you're feeling like focus is too hard, you don't want to commit too soon, or you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, you don't want to be a one-trick pony, I just want to remind you that focus doesn't simply mean to do only one thing. Focus means that all the things we're doing are aimed toward one thing. Focus is desire. It's knowing what you want and knowing over time what you don't want. It's knowing what you want and going for it. It's going for it at the expense or at the cost or the risk that you'll miss out on all the other things. So the confusing thing about focus is that you're not just one thing. You're many things. You're a scattered collection of experiences, desires, emotions. You're the product of influences, like tons of different influences in your life. You're some kind of mixture or hybrid of all the ideas that you've encountered in your life. You're a mixture of neurons and genes and cells. You're a mind and a soul and a thinking being. You want many things. You have many things. You are different things to different people. Every person experiences you in a different way. They experience a different dimension of who you are in a unique way that we'll never even truly understand. But somehow, you're not just a scattered assortment of experiences and perceptions. You're this one thing. You're all these things wrapped up in an individual package. You're a breathing, heart-beating, feeling, thinking entity, singular thing in this moment in time and space. So this is how focus works. It's many things converging through a lens into a single point. And if we're going with this focus metaphor, the question is, and I haven't quite figured it out, what are you? Are you the focusing mechanism or the point of focus itself? Are you the magnifying glass, or are you the point of heat from all the energy coming from the sun converging and starting that fire? I think sometimes we're the glass. I think sometimes it's our perspective through which all the things about us come through and converge, and the point is the result. But sometimes we are the result. Some other thing that's happening is focusing into us. What that is, I can't say. I haven't really figured that one out yet. But here's another thought, like we think about a magnifying glass that kind of turns a bunch of stuff into one thing. Then there's the telescope that kind of puts us at the end of the focus, that puts us as the point. There's a telescope takes some little swatch of the sky millions of light years away and then makes that distant thing all we can see in our field of vision. It takes something that we can barely perceive with the naked eye amidst this whole sky of stars, and then it takes just one tiny thing, and then that's all we can see. So there's an interesting focus analogy with the telescope as well. I need to play that out. But either way, we're creatures of focus. And I think we're not happy unless we see things coming together in a meaningful way. We're not happy unless we know that what we're doing is amounting to something in the end. We're happiest when we have a sense of purpose. So focus is all kinds of things like I've just been talking about, but it is above all what we see as our sense of purpose. Our sense of purpose is our focus. We may be doing all kinds of things, but when it's pointed at our purpose, that's when we begin to see what we're doing coming together in a meaningful way. So of course, all this begs the question, what's your purpose? And I would just say, if you don't know what your purpose is, make it your purpose to find out. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. My name is Tom Froese. I'll see you in the next one.